I didn't quite know how do I begin this video, how do I talk, and but I'm just gonna go right into it. I'm gonna talk about an experience which can happen with anybody. It doesn't necessarily matter if you're a man or if you're a woman or you're from the LGBT community or a transgender. I remember back in school I was into sports a lot and I had to attend a tournament in Nagpur. In the accommodation they were providing was not the best, but not the safest too, but we had to make do. We were on the first floor, so anybody who could walk by that area could see us. So there was this particular man who just seemed very seamless, walked in. I looked at him and I went back to doing what I was doing. And he stood there diagonally, facing towards the place I was sitting in the balcony, and removes his pants down and starts feeling himself up. And for someone who's 13 who doesn't understand what this he's doing, what is a mere act, I get horrified, and the first thing that was in my hand, I just threw it at him, and I walked out. It just shook me up.
And I was venting to my boss about a difficult client that I was dealing with, and he said difficult clients are like a rape. You just lie down and you wait for it to end, and but at the end of it, you just have to ensure that the client is happy.
I was sitting in the court canteen, minding my own business, when a middle-aged man and a woman advocate came up to me and asked me if they could occupy the very same table. They were talking within themselves, and he suddenly turned to me and asked me who I was interning with. I replied to him, and to my uttermost shock, he tells me back that if I want to be successful in this profession, I need to have some body, and he said this, gesturing to my breast. I was pained and hurt at this very comment because the woman advocate sitting with him didn't even stop him or didn't even stand up against him for me, and she just laughed away.
First sexual harassment incident that I faced was when I just started traveling by train, and this one day I got into the general compartment. I realized that there was a man standing behind me who was feeling me up, though the train was pretty empty, so there was no reason why we should actually be touching. And when I called that man out, the first reaction that I got from all the people around was that, Madam, why did you get into this compartment? Don't you have the ladies' compartment for yourself? So why did you get into this compartment? Not a single person admonished the man for what he had done or questioned him, but everybody happened to question me and look at me with suspicion.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fifth episode of We Talk a Lot, where I, Akshay Pai, and Mr. Bhumesh Bellam discuss the legal aspects about news, current affairs, and everything that's interesting.
So before we start with our topic, please guys like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and please do click the bell icon so that you never miss our episode.
So the topic for today is sexual harassment and rights of a woman.
Now, sexual harassment is a topic which is always so relevant, and we don't really realize how prevalent it is in society. But 8 out of 10 women face sexual harassment on a regular basis. And it surprises and shocks me, but this is the reality and truth. So in today's episode, we are going to cover the various aspects of sexual harassment. The sexual harassment physically, the sexual harassment on social media, etc. And also sexual harassment at workplace. We are also going to discuss the various nuances of how sexual harassment proceedings go on in court and to what extent nowadays, especially in urban areas, they're also being misused. And it's not just going to be the both of us, because I believe that if there are just two men talking about a topic like sexual harassment, I don't think it's fair. So tonight we have invited not one but two guests. First, I would like to call upon Miss Gayatri Gokhale, who's a practicing advocate in Bombay High Court and has argued and appeared and worked on many matters related to women rights, women empowerment, including the matter of Haji Ali Dargah. So Gayatri, it's lovely to have you with us.
Hi guys, I'm so excited to be here, and I think it's really cool that being from the opposite sex, y'all are putting out that empathy and realizing the importance of what women face, and it'll be a really interesting and engaging dialogue between us.
And our second guest is Miss Swamini Phansekar. She is an artist, she's an actor, she's a director, she's a producer, and she's worked on various ad films and short films. She's our very own Farhan Akhtar. Swamini
Oh my
Bansekar.
God.
Hi.
Yay. This is going to go in my acceptance for Oscar.
Your description just made me sound super boring, but okay. Right from Haji Ali
Well,
Dargah to
Y'all are just hyping it.
it's fine. Lawyers are boring only. It's okay. That's why we are here, to make it interesting.
That's why, yeah, exactly. I was going to say lawyers aren't boring. We are going to show that we aren't boring. So let's dive right into the topic. I think it's a vast topic. The whole scenario has changed. In fact, we've grown up in this time where everyone's more aware about rights of a woman. Everyone is more concerned and everyone's way more sensitive about it. And therefore, I think we should talk about everything in depth regarding sexual harassment.
Sexual harassment of women is prevalent across all society, all sexes, all age groups. It's not just in Bombay.
Yeah.
We're looking at the native places. We're looking pan India. I think we're looking we're looking globally that how prevalent sexual harassment of women is. And so when I think of sexual harassment, I can think of a person 80-year-old lady to a 2-year-old child, or being sexually harassed. And I can think of a CEO, right from a CEO to a housemaid being sexually harassed. So I think that pretty much spells out how prevalent and how plagued our entire world is. It's a pandemic.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also think that it's men and women who go through abuse, and it is prevalent throughout the society. You will know, like personally, as a woman, I know more than 5 people, like more than 5 of my friends who have gone through this. And I feel like even though there has been a lot of talk in the recent years, I still think that there needs to be a lot of change in the mentality, in the views against these topics. And I feel like even though there has been so much talk about, I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, like whatever is happening, the awareness, the raising of voices, and men being scared of a woman raising her voice or a woman having a voice right now, it has become much better, like she said, since in the last 10 years. But I still see that if I'm going in the train, I still hear the same things. Like as a woman of, like not somebody coming from the field of law or somebody from the system, I feel like I still feel unsafe.
For all the viewers, after the Nirbhaya case in 2012, our legislature came out with a lot of amendments in the year 2013 by the 2013 Amendment Act, wherein there were many sections added. For example, Section 354, which deals with sexual harassment. 4 more subheadings of sexual harassment were added in 354. Section 376, which is the section punishing rape in our country. About 6 or 7 more subheadings were added for the punishment of rape, and the situation of women and women rights in our country, at least legally, has been improved.
In 2013, before the Nirbhaya amendments, even outraging modesty of a woman, as per the Indian Penal Code, it had to be physical assault only. Only then was it regarded as harassment. There also it came a big change where indirect methods or even gestures, facial expressions, verbal overtures, everything was considered as harassment.
Maybe some people don't feel it yet, or you don't feel like the changes have been made. But the fact that today there are laws which protect a woman in every smallest way, like from making only physical acts as sexual harassment to even just winking or like verbal actions into sexual harassment, that is a process and we are a part of it. So, and
And
for
not
every
just-
strata of
and-
society.
And not just sexual harassment per se or something related to a sexual crime, but even rights of women in general. Like as she mentioned, the Domestic Violence Act, then there is Dowry Prohibition Act, then there are so many other acts as well. There's a National Commission for Women Act. Yeah, Indecent Representation of Women's Act. There are many more. In fact, we are obviously missing out a lot. But that's the whole point, because we don't want to make this episode very vast and very wide. So we'll stick to sexual harassment. So now,
I have a question though for Swamini. I'm sorry, I have a question though for Swamini. Swamini, do you know how, like after when we spoke about this episode, did you know the amount of statute?
There are so many things that you mentioned, like for example, like showing pornography to somebody is also considered as a sexual offense. There were so many things that I didn't know.
Yeah.
So which is also what I wanted to talk about, that there are so many things as a normal woman that I don't know about my own rights. So it was a very eye-opening sort of thing when I came to know, oh dude, this also exists, you know. So
I think what
Yeah.
we're lacking is more awareness then, which great you guys are working towards that.
So I guess it's a good time to move to the Indian Penal Code, which talks about sexual harassment. So that is
Yeah.
Section 354, Section 354A, B, C, D, and Section 509. So Amini just heard these sections and her face is like, please guys, keep quiet.
When we begin at 354, outraging the modesty of a woman, and that this has been there since 1860. What happened was that there was a somewhat a lacking in this in this offense, and therefore then they have added 354A, B, C, and D. And interestingly, 354A talks about sexual harassment.
354A includes physical contact. It may be an unwelcome advance. It may be a demand for sexual favors or showing pornography to a lady against her will. And the last includes sexually colored remarks. And I think physical wounds may heal, but what you say, your words can really stick with you. And I think that really scars a lady for life. I was dealing with this one case where this lady, a part of a very big magazine, she was an MBA graduate, and her employer used to ask for favors in return to promote her. So this fell within the ambit of 354. All he wanted was pretend to be my girlfriend in public. So to a normal person, that didn't seem like outraging her modesty, or that didn't seem like harassment. But if you speak to her, she is mentally devastated today. So
Yeah.
I think the legislature has really taken into account all these things and included physical contact and advances, which obviously to a layman, qualify as sexual harassment, but they've also accounted for a demand or request in sexual favors, like I mentioned, which is very prevalent. So I think these the amendments have really come to the need of so many women who are not ideally categorized as victims of harassment and didn't have any avenue to redress themselves, but now they do.
354A has a punishment of maximum 3 years imprisonment. That is also quite strict actually.
I
So it's-
also feel like, how do you prove these things? The minute it happens to a woman is taken aback. She's shocked. She's in shame. So I don't think that it is very practical for her to be like, oh shit, no, abhi ye mere saath hua hai. The next thing I'm going to do is. So, to give you an example, one of my friends from college used to take a taxi from Dadar station to Ruia College every day. And what happened once was, she was in the taxi and the man had the audacity, the driver had the audacity to stop the taxi, turn around and grope her. Like, he squeezed her breast. I don't have a better way to put this forward, but and she was just standing there shocked. And she was so shocked. The poor thing she didn't know what to do. So what do you do when cases like these happen? I mean, I agree. I completely understand that it will obviously, all sort of evidence will go. She will of course not remember the taxi number or how the guy looked like or all of those things. But what do you do in these situations?
So Amini, to answer that, as you said, how will she prove she didn't have the taxi number? So that's what is investigation, right? There'll be some CCTV footage. They will track her route. Then they will know the taxi driver. Then they can track that person. So there are various ways to come through.
It is able to prove that, because if this happened to me personally, I would be like, there is no chance that somebody is going to find out who this guy was, and there is no
I'll tell you,
chance
because
that
there are multiple ways. Because then they can track the cell tower there. They can probably know how many people which cell phones were there in that particular area. Then they can have a identification parade. The taxi driver could be traced through the CCTV cameras or the number. There are ways. I'm not saying it's a one-day thing that you complain right now and then tomorrow you'll know who's the perpetrator. But like, there is a process, there is an investigation. It can happen. That's what the job of the police is. Like, that's what they do.
No, and I think that's how they tracked down all the Nirbhaya convicts. That there were so many of them, and it was a bus and it was a street, and she was, unconscious, and they traced them to different parts of Delhi.
And I think the most important thing is that this is what awareness is. You all have to be aware. In that situation, I understand it's very difficult, but once you're aware of it, if that girl knew that she could stand up and she is more powerful than him because she has a law backing her up, if the girl knows that, then there's nothing to stop her. And that is what women empowerment is. That at the end of the day, if that girl knew that someone stopping a cab and groping her is a crime and it's very serious, then she will not be hesitant of going to the police and saying, listen, I'm not wrong, he's wrong.
Yeah, the more the stigma is
exactly
washed out, like the more I get empowered to say that is like nothing wrong happened with me. I am not the one to be ashamed of, or the one to feel like I am the victim. Once that mentality somehow is replaced by empowerment, that is when I think we can expect some sort of change.
And so everyone must always remember, whenever you're uncomfortable, whenever you feel that something wrong has happened, okay, immediately report to the police. That is the first thing you must do. I understand there might be a situation where it's something so severe that you might not be able to immediately go to the closest police station. But there are also a lot of women helplines. There's 103, which is the children's and women's helpline of the Mumbai police. I'm talking about this only in Mumbai. For every city, there'll be a different helpline. There are also different numbers. You can just Google it. It's available. There are websites. Sexual harassment in our urban life and sexual harassment in the rural life. In the rural areas, it is a given that these things happen. So I need not live an equal life like a man. A woman will be thinking that way. In the rural area, it's just given that you're going to be sexually harassed. How do we reach there?
In the rural areas, women are not even aware that there is something called as sexual harassment. They have no idea.
Yeah.
They think that that is just normal how things go. It's very difficult to reach out, and it's ironic how we are doing this on YouTube, which is internet, and more than half of these rural areas don't even have internet or electricity, let alone internet.
Yeah.
So it's, as you said, it's very difficult to reach people.
In fact, I did an activity with people from Ratnagiri, from village women from Ratnagiri, and it was astonishing. And I was, so shocked that when I said कि आपके पति आपको पीटते हैं क्या, they didn't think that there was anything wrong with it. So they feel like, you get married and just like he'd give you pleasure, he'd give you pain. So here we're going back to step 0, where we're spelling out, look, what is right and what is wrong. So I think we're at that primitive stage when it comes to the rural areas. And I don't think there's any scope for false cases or misuse of law. There is no use of law, so let alone misuse of law.
So to conclude all of this and sexual harassment in general, we just only spoke about one aspect. That was 354A, and we consumed there's so much to really speak about regarding 354A. But interestingly, with the 2013 amendment, they added B, C, D, and that penalizes voyeurism, stalking, even disrobe a woman, and therefore sexual harassment in general is a very wide and extensive topic, and it's covering all sorts of sexual harassment taking place in a day-to-day life.
Along with 354, there's also 509, which is criminal intimidation of a woman with words or gestures. 509 could involve if a man abuses a woman. And when we talk about 354C and 354D, which is about voyeurism and stalking, I think it's a good time to talk about the offenses under the IT Act with respect to sexual harassment and sexual offenses. And one peculiar fact about the IT Act is that it is gender neutral, A, and B, that it is not restricted to India only. So even if an offense is committed outside India, that person, the offender, can be tried. So I think this is pretty interesting because it gives a little perspective, and it is extremely wide to include all genders. So under the Act, there are mainly 4 offences relating to sexual harassment and sexual offences. Firstly being section 66E of the IT Act, which deals with privacy, which says that anyone who intentionally publishes or transmits image of the private area of a person without their consent. Second is section 67 of the IT Act, which talks about transmitting obscene or lascivious material. Now, difference between 67 and 66E is that 67 is not restricted to images only. It can be any material. And also 66E, the person who actually actively takes the picture can be punished. And whereas in 67 is the person, he need not take the picture, but if he's transmitted, that's enough. So I think that's one more difference. Now, third is 67A of the IT Act. This is basically publishing or transmitting sexually explicit material online. So this gives a wider perspective. So anything related to sexually explicit material online will be punished. Then we come to 67B of the IT Act. This is specific to only children. So it is publishing or transmitting electronic material depicting children in a sexually explicit form. Now, apart from other offenses which could be attracted under the Protection of Children from Sexual Offences Act, this is in addition to that. And apart from this, as we already spoke about 354C and 354D of the IPC, which talks about voyeurism and stalking.
When we talk about sexual harassment in cyberspace, it becomes very relevant because this is really covering a lot of aspects, a lot of forms of harassment and sexual violence which is faced by women. It is covered under this act, and this now protects the women. For academic purposes, I have a question for you all. If a girl has uploaded certain pictures, let's say in which her cleavage is visible, okay, and it's in an open profile, someone looks at that picture and sends it to someone else privately and says, oh, look how beautiful this woman is. Do you think that constitutes an offense because he is merely sharing an open profile picture through facility given by Instagram to another person without really commenting anything lewd or sexual?
If that is the case, then may not, because because as you said, I mean, he commented on say how beautiful she is. He could also, if someone shares the picture and says, oh, I like these shoes, I want to buy these shoes, I mean, of course, just because you share the picture doesn't make it an offense. The fact that you share the picture and then comment on it in a lewd and mischievous way, that constitutes into an offense.
No, I think I don't agree with. I think
Yeah.
A, it will depend on the type of comment. B, it will depend on the kind of picture shared. Then it's your intention will come into the picture, and your intention is not to sexually comment on the picture or on her body part. But if you're sending a picture of just her breast and then saying, "Oh, how beautiful," then I think the picture and the comment, these two things coupled with the intention. So I think these three factors will be need to be considered.
Meaning, I still feel it's morally, it shouldn't be an offense, but this is the ambiguity and this is the problem of the IT Act. It's still not very, our IT industry and our digital media and our social media world, as far as harassment is concerned, needs to be more specific and needs to be more empowering for women.
See, because very often, Akshay, what happens and is that where a boyfriend and a girlfriend, where the girl is consensually probably stripping in front of a camera on video call, for example. Okay, that is by consent. So there can be no offense qua the boyfriend or her lover is concerned. However, there are very often what happens is along with him, there are his friends in the same room who are also witness to that. So she is doing it with her consent. So that takes away the point of consent. But at the same time, other people viewing it becomes voyeurism. Then whether it falls into the ambit of the IT Act.
But that's the whole difficulty, right, with the investigating agency also. Like, they feel just because a girl is stripping with consent, it is consent to the entire world, which is not true. It is consent to that one particular person. And when that one particular person is showing this video to 4 of his friends, then that
It becomes
consent,
culpable.
of course, and that consent breaks. So there's no consent further. So it does amount to an offense.
In fact, we were discussing about, the episode, and I received a message on Instagram saying that, do you watch porn or do you want to see porn? So that itself is harassment. I mean, I'm a lawyer, I know the law, and we are dealing with these things, but to somebody else, it could have created a havoc in her head. And this is a clear example of harassment
And like
an offense, I think, under the IT Act.
Yeah, and like I've heard a lot of my friends have faced this, like they've received all these DMs and private messages on Instagram asking to send nude pictures, asking whether
They also
you want
send
to
their
have
own pictures.
That is also scarring and harassment.
Of course,
Yeah.
definitely.
Also, stalking and cyber stalking is something which we generally speak about, is because girls are literally stalked all, and I think it's become a given. Like, in fact, people take pride. Yeah, I'm a very good stalker. I can find out any information about somebody. It's great that the legislature has tried to cover this thing, but stalking is something also which is very difficult to prove, and the IT Act is also a little ambiguous about stalking. So luckily, we have 354D, which kind of covers it.
But Akshay, I think out of all of these, I personally feel that stalking is the most dangerous sort of crime. It doesn't need you to actually follow somebody to their house. Knowing where a person lives is not as private anymore as your social media, because I think more than my address, yours or mine, our entire lives are on social media today. So I think stalking as a crime is the scariest sort of offense.
As we speak about stalking, I think it's very essential to read the stalking definition as per the IPC, because everything doesn't amount to stalking. So there are two main things: so physical stalking and of course internet stalking. The first thing is physical stalking, where it is following a woman and contacting or attempting to contact such woman to foster personal interaction repeatedly, despite a clear indication of disinterest by such woman, or monitors the use by a woman of the internet, email, or any other form of electronic communication. So just if I suppose stalk some person, I mean, stalk is a very wrong word. If I suppose browse through a person's profile, that is not stalking. But if I browse through a person's profile after that person telling me not to do the same, that is stalking. We use this word stalking very loosely, but stalking is actually much serious than what we infer stalking to be.
We've covered the cyberspace, and the last thing which we need to cover, and the most spoken of form of sexual harassment, which needed to be addressed very seriously by the Supreme Court because of Vishaka's landmark judgment, is sexual harassment at workplace. And because of that judgment, the legislature, in fact, after a long and with a very lackadaisical attitude, has finally enacted the statute in 2013, although judgment of 97. And finally, we have a legislation which completely protects and covers all forms of sexual harassment, sexual violence, sexual abuse in workplace, any sort of gender discrimination in the workplace.
I think the major two incidents, or rather two ingredients of a sexual harassment at workplace, which usually happens, is One is the quid pro quo, and the other is a hostile work environment. Now, quid pro quo, as we already spoke about, like how superiors usually end up blackmailing people, and hostile work environment is, I think, rather wide, because that can include everything, like passing sexist comments while you're working, and just making that discrimination, that gender discrimination, very overt and obvious. I think it's a most prevalent act right now, and it is widely being used. Act itself says that any workplace which has more than 10 employees needs to and has to have an internal complaints committee dealing with matters of sexual harassment at workplace.
I think the Sexual Harassment Act is commendable because it remedies this entire space where a criminal action under the IPC doesn't give you actual relief. So it probably, sentences the accused person. But I'm continuing to be subjected to that harassment. The harassment doesn't stop. But so the remedies, I think, in the Sexual Harassment Act are brilliant. It's a very relief-oriented act. And I think the whole point that there is no the settlement cannot be a monetary settlement. So this nips the cases that are false in nature.
Yeah, I think it's something that someone in the corporate field can relate. But you know what? The thing is, I also face a certain kind of exploitation of power. Like if somebody is at a higher position than me, and if it more often than not a male who is at a higher position than me, then I'm compelled to feel like I am in a way supposed to, like, go out for dinners, or so I don't think that the workplace situation can be applied to me per se.
In fact, interestingly, you ask, Swamini, it need not only be the employees, even non-employees can invoke the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act.
Okay.
So this is that definition of an aggrieved woman in the act. If the aggrieved woman is in a workplace, it's a woman of any age, whether employed or not, who alleges to have been subjected to an act of sexual harassment by the respondent being the perpetrator. Then in a dwelling place or house, a woman of any age employed with such a dwelling place or house.
I think dwelling place or house even takes into account a domestic servant.
So then we come to what is sexual harassment according to the act. So it is a physical contact or an advances, a demand or request for sexual favors, making sexually colored remarks, showing pornography, any other physical, verbal or non-verbal conduct of sexual nature. Then we come to an internal complaints committee, which has to be formed under the act for any company or any firm or any concern which has more than 10 employees. The presiding officer of this committee is a woman employed at a senior level at a workplace from amongst the employees. Secondly, not less than 2 members amongst the employees who are committed to the cause of women, social work, or have legal knowledge. And 1 member from an NGO committed to the cause of women or someone familiar with issues related to sexual harassment. Now, as you said, what about companies who have less than 10 employees? Or what about other places at other workplaces, for example, dwelling houses,
Like maids.
like maids, and
Like
what do
maids.
they do? Where do they go? So there is a local complaints committee established under the act for every zilla or district. There, the chairperson is any eminent woman in the field of social work and committed to the cause of women. Then 1 woman nominated working in the block, taluka or tehsil or ward or municipality in the district. Then 2 members, out of which 1 should be a woman from an NGO committed to the cause of women or someone familiar with issues relating to sexual harassment. Now, the process after the incident of sexual harassment happens. So a complaint needs to be lodged to the internal complaints committee or the local complaints committee within 3 months of such act. Then the first procedure is mediation at the request of an aggrieved woman. So if the woman does not want mediation, it can directly move to inquiry. So as Gayatri already mentioned, that this mediation, the settlement which happens, it cannot be monetary. It has to be a settlement otherwise. Then we come
What if, sorry to cut you, what if the complaint is lodged after 3 months?
You can
Like-
explain your delay. If your delay is explained and reasonable, then they consider it.
Okay.
And the 3 months period is basically from the last incident. So usually
Okay.
harassment cases are continuing offenses because they
Yeah.
happen daily or periodically. So the
Huh.
delay period starts from the latest incident. And the act also takes into account that if you can reasonably explain your delay, which may mean anything, which can be, you are being threatened, emotionally blackmailed not to come out, then that will be considered and your delay will be condoned.
And then after that, we come to the inquiry into the complaint. Now, inquiry would basically be all the evidence, and maybe witnesses can be called. So the ICC and the LCC have rights to summon witnesses. So they can call upon witnesses. Then there is a proper examination. And the entire procedure, like how it happens in court, but in 90 days. So in 90 days, there is a full complete inquiry. And after that, there are three outcomes, either guilty or not guilty. If there is guilty, then there is, of course, action for misconduct, which would include compensation, apology, reprimand, censure, withhold promotion, withhold pay raise, and also there is community service. So these are the things when a person is guilty. And if the person is not guilty, now there are two things: either there is not sufficient evidence or there is a malicious prosecution by the victim girl. Now if there is not sufficient evidence, then of course there is no action and things just continue therefore. And if there is malicious prosecution by the victim, then the same action which is taken against the perpetrator, as I just read out, can be taken against the victim also for false prosecution. That may be by giving false evidence, doctoring false evidence to frame a particular person. So even malicious prosecution is also protected under this act. If you are still unhappy with this entire outcome, there is an appeal procedure which will lie before the industrial courts.
And thereafter, you can go. You're always welcome to go to the High Court to redress any abuse of the process of law. But Bhomesh, I think that apart from this entire procedure, one very positive and striking feature of the act is the interim protection that is given.
Yeah.
Because very often what will happen is during that particular inquiry that you spoke about, there may be intimate threatening witnesses, tampering evidence. So during that period of time, the act takes into account and gives you it's a very benevolent feature wherein they have considered this scenario, and the committee can pass orders like restraining the perpetrator from coming into the workplace, from contacting these witnesses, or they may, for the mental peace of the victim, they may give her paid leave, which will be in addition to her general leave.
And also maybe transfer the perpetrator to another branch office,
which is immediate relief that you'd never get in a police case.
So the beauty of this legislation is it is given an alternate dispute redressal forum to a victim. It is not a very difficult procedure, like how Swamini, your concern was in the beginning that how will I go to the police station, what will I report? So it's much more simpler. You just go to your boss and tell him so and so has happened. It's the responsibility of your boss to make sure that the committee is set up and whatever procedure has to be followed. There's an equal opportunity for everyone to be heard, and it's quick. Like you said, the interim measure as well as a final remedy is very quick. Your redressal will be answered in 90 days. They could extend it depending on the case, but let's say compared to a criminal trial where it obviously will result in something graver and actual justice being done, here there is quicker justice which can be really, might redress the issue and might not really burden our criminal courts, the investigating authorities, and it could be something which can be resolved and the person can be reprimanded at the end of the day. So I think it's a great initiative, and the importance of this legislation is that it is not really, according to me, it is not really to punish the perpetrator. That the criminal courts will do. But this is to kind of make sure there's equality. Because at the end of the day, we have to make sure that there's no gender discrimination. The moment there's any sort of gender discrimination, that can be easily redressed to by following the procedure under the POSH Act.
And for just making the work environment safer for the lady.
Yes.
I think that's what it does, and that's what they wanted to do.
And also the beauty of the act is that it is in addition to any other relief. Like you can still go to the police and still the entire criminal trial and procedure can happen along with this. So it's not like if you choose to file a complaint in this internal complaints committee, you can still go to the police station and file an FIR or whatever it is apart from that.
I still feel like somewhere down the line, women are still scared to come up and say ki this is happening to me, because tomorrow if I say ki my boss is harassing me, I will be sacked first. For example, he is a person in power, so he will do everything in his means to make sure that his ass is safe. So there is that fear that even if I speak out, just because this person is in power, I may not get the justice that I deserve.
So the composition of the committee is such that it's not going to be dominated or governed by the employer. So it's a very neutral committee. It's not a committee governed by your employer. So you won't have to worry about it.
With respect to sexual harassment at workplace, it's not necessary that a person should go to this internal complaints committee. They can in fact go online on this website called shebox.nic.in, where you can register it online, and even you can register a complaint on the NCW website, which is for offenses not just in workplace but otherwise. And here I just would like to add, because most of our viewers are either lawyers or like law students. So now there's a gender sensitization and internal complaints committee known as the GSICC in the Supreme Court and the High Court, and the DGSICC in the district courts, which is the District Court Gender Sensitization and Internal Complaints Committee. It works almost very similar to how the Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act works. So now that we spoke about all the remedies and rights available to a victim and to a girl who faces sexual harassment, now what we often as lawyers have been noticing and have been experiencing is that, especially in these urban areas like in Bombay, we are experiencing that there are a lot of cases where these particular provisions and these particular rights and remedies given to the women have been misused for their personal use and for personal gains, or for means of blackmail and many other, or even personal vengeance and money. It's kind of disturbing because the intention of the legislation was of a shield and not of a sword. It was to protect the rights of a woman, not so that the woman can use these rights and remedies to attack another man for their personal vengeance. A person can be accused of rape if that person has firstly promised to marry that person and later on decides not to marry her. Now, this often happens in bad breakups where couples indulge in sexual activities and they have a bad breakup, and then the woman uses this as a sword just for an act of personal vengeance. I just feel that it's extremely unfair if women use these particular rights and remedies, which are for their empowerment and their protection, to their own advantage for malefides and for personal vengeance.
I feel like he also cannot overlook the fact that these rights and these rules, or whatever you call it, have been placed in for women's rights. So of course you cannot overlook the fact for years how women have been oppressed and how everything that they've been through. So now it only makes, I'm not saying that it makes sense, but if now a certain gender is getting the power, of course there's going to be exploitation of power. Wherever there's power, there's going to be exploitation of power. But that does not mean that we overlook the fact that we are getting these rights, and it's a good thing. It's more of a good thing, in my opinion, than a bad thing. And I think there needs to be a balance of somewhat, where it's not like a woman's word is used as a gospel truth, but there has to be some sort of balance where I can also come in and raise my voice, but at the same time not misuse it.
So like Bhomesh pointed out, the promise to marry cases, I'd like to term them as urban rape, because I don't think it happens. I mean, at least whatever cases I have dealt with concerning promise to marry has happened, between educated adult partners where they've been in a long-term relationship, had sex on multiple occasions. Obviously, these girls are educated. They know what they are doing. They know the consequences of their act. And if a relationship goes sour, the next thing that the guy knows is there's an FIR against him. There are, harsh sections of rape invoked. He's fired from his job because pendency of an FIR and a section of rape, these big corporate houses fire you, and his reputation damaged. Why? Because of a breakup gone sour. And Bhomesh, I don't think it's only rape, but misuse as far as, 498A, which talks about cruelty, harassment for dowry, domestic violence. So I think there's so much misuse of these sections also, which are all beneficial legislations, and more worrying than ruining the innocent man's life. I think it is actually affecting women only, women for whom this beneficial legislation is enacted. Because there's so much rampant misuse, the genuine cases are also looked upon with an eye of suspicion.
I think we should more so concentrate on sexual harassment. Because yes, even sexual harassment has been misused. And when we speak about this, I think something which is very relevant is the Me Too movement. Globally, women started speaking up about incidents of them being harassed, which might have taken place maybe a year before or even like 20, 30 years before. Instead of actually going to the courts, people came to social media, and cases did not actually result into FIRs or any sort of conviction. And people thought that their justice was served just by defaming someone on social media. What is the right remedy? Is only speaking up on social media right remedy?
I personally feel like social media puts a strong pressure on the judiciary as well as the police, because tomorrow if I go again lodge a complaint, that it will get that much of attention. It will just be one of the cases that are piling. So once I put it on social media, once I see that once people see that there are 200 more people looking at my story, there are 200 more people tweeting about my story, and there is this sort of buzz that is created that compels the judiciary and all of these other systems to take an action. I should also at the same time lodge a complaint, but I don't think that it's wrong to put it up on social media.
I think for a moment here, we should stop thinking like lawyers and as defense attorneys. I feel like this movement of Me Too, more than anything, it has encouraged more and more women to come out of their shell and share their stories. But I feel like people in our society, especially in India, people are so shy and so afraid of coming out and saying things of this sort and sharing their experiences. This movement is kind of responsible to take away that social stigma in a way. If talking about it out there in social media, if that gives them closure more than what a court would give them after 5-6 years, I think it's only justified.
No, fair enough, as long as there's no defamation and no media trial and no tarnishing of image before he's even convicted of, being guilty of their allegations.
Why after 12 years this woman is coming out? It's just that when a movement is happening, when I see that there are 10,000 more women like me, it just empowers me to come out and talk about it, and it gives me that courage to come and talk about it, which maybe I didn't have 10 years ago.
Why I ask this and why we are speaking about this is that I'm not against people speaking up. I'm not against the revolutionary movement. I'm not against the wrongdoer being punished. All I'm saying is that if you really want justice, there is a certain procedure established, and no matter what is happening, you must always take recourse to that. Speaking up on social media is not your only recourse. In most of the cases, it results in actually hampering the real justice. Are you, as a victim, more satisfied by the guy being defamed and making allegations against you? Or are you going to be more satisfied by him being put behind bars, maybe after 20 years? At the end of the day, it's a matter of principle, and it's a matter of making sure the rule of law and societal balance is maintained.
It is very idealistic for you to think that if something happens to me, I will wait for 20 years for justice. I would want the person till I'm alive or till I am in the coming years. I don't want that person to take a bail and be roaming for 20 years.
Which is exactly my point. That even after you make that allegation and even after he's defamed, that does not really result in justice all the time.
In Harvey Weinstein's example, where so many women came out and said that he's been sexually exploiting so many other women. So in that case, justice was actually done because this case was completely dormant. His case, nobody came out and spoke about it for so many years, and suddenly it came up. So I think even if justice is done in one case, and when it comes out from a dormant volcano, even 10 fake cases can be excused because those 9 other fake cases will be going through an entire trial. But the amount of awareness which that one genuine case created, even the men who were completely ignorant about these facts have become so conscious about things like this.
We all agree that speaking on social media is not the wrong thing, although a few of us are little differing about the extent you can speak up. And as long as you are also taking a legal remedy, we spoke about how prevalent sexual harassment is. And that's why when we reached out to people to speak about their experiences or just their opinions regarding sexual harassment and rights of a woman, we got an outpour of responses. And I guess this video speaks for itself.
When we talk of sexual harassment, we are just talking about the tip of the iceberg, whereas the entire ice that is submerged is so much more than just sexual harassment.
I don't think I know a single woman who has not been sexually harassed at some point in her life. These are the shared and lived experiences of women that largely go unheard and unseen.
There are times when people are asking younger girls to come out on dates. Maybe that person doesn't want to go. This happens quite a lot at workplaces also. When, based on seniority, when a specific girl is asked to come on a date which she doesn't want to go, it could probably be a lunch date. That's also harassment.
These are the kind of things which also make or break a workplace, and these are the kind of things that toxic work environments are made up of.
The problem is when we grade this kind of incidents that happen to us, we say it's only a comment or it's only a text or it's only a touch. It should not be okay. Anything that's making you uncomfortable should not be okay in any form.
If you go through any of such experiences, make sure you speak up about it. Make sure that the harasser is pointed out. We need to pass down the value of standing up against these degenerates of society, and also instead of pushing women or pulling women down, lifting them up and encouraging them every step of the way.
let's wrap it up, Bhumesh.
It's been a great episode, and thank you so much
Yes.
for having both.
Thank you, guys. Really.
Thanks, guys, and thanks for doing this. I
Yes,
think that
it was really fun and I enjoyed it a lot.
And we'd also like to thank all the ladies, the women, the girls who reached out to us and who spoke up. So thank you
Yes.
for sharing
Thank you
your
so
videos.
Yeah, and thanks to you guys for like raising these topics about women empowerment.
It's been a great episode and thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
See you.
Bye.
See you.
cheers. Bye.